Thank you, Bradley, for that very kind introduction, and thanks to Connie Chang and the Globe 2010 Organizing Committee for organizing such a wonderful event here this year. As Bradley said, I'm Samaras with the RAND Corporation, and I'm going to talk a little bit about upstream emissions from plug-in hybrid vehicles and how we can manage some of those impacts. So for those of you not familiar with RAND, RAND is a nonprofit, nonpartisan institution, and we help improve policymaking and decision-making through objective research and analysis. So what am I going to talk about briefly in my 5 to 7 minutes? What are we talking about when we mean life cycle impacts or upstream impacts? What are the drivers behind some of the GHG impacts in this area when we're talking about plug-in cars? And what can we do about it? So what are life cycle impacts? And this is, a while ago I bought a Mac to be cool, and that didn't work. But also what else doesn't work is sometimes the graphics don't come through, so I'll just have to talk through some of these things if it doesn't happen. So when we're talking about life cycle impacts, we're talking about a number of different stages in a product or a process's life cycle, right? So we're talking about raw material acquisition, and that is the mining, the extraction of both the minerals and the elements and the other things that we would need. We're going to process those, we're going to transport those, we're going to get them someplace, and then we're going to manufacture something, a battery, a car, we're going to refine oil, we're going to process coal, we're going to make hydrogen, we're going to manufacture something, and then we're going to use it, right? So we're going to drive in a vehicle, we're going to use electricity. That's going to either be combusting fossil fuel at a plant, it will be spilling water through a hydroelectric spillway, or it will be burning gasoline or diesel or biofuel in a combustion engine. And then finally, at the end, when we're all done with everything, we got to get rid of it. Right? So we're going to be recycling batteries, we're going to be scrapping cars, recycling pieces of all those, and then landfilling and disposing what we can't reuse. So that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about life cycle impacts, everything from raw material extraction through manufacture, through use, and then finally at the end of life. So the headline here is that for plug-in hybrids, the use phase dominates GHG impacts for most cases. And the manufacturing impacts are small, but not zero, right? So when you make a vehicle, you're using steel, you're using different elements, you're using energy, you're producing greenhouse gases. When you make a battery, same thing. And batteries, at present, at least from some of our studies and some other studies, they are energy intensive, but not a deal breaker. Nickel metal hydride batteries, the current batteries that are used in a Prius, about 220 kilograms of GHGs per kilowatt hour of capacity. This translates for a current plug-in or current Prius about 1 to 2 grams of GHG per kilometer over the lifetime, really not too much. Lithium ion, because the energy density is higher, you get, and because of some of the characteristics of the elements, you get a little bit better footprint, or a lot better footprint, about 120 kilograms of GHGs per kilowatt hour of capacity. So 5 to 8 grams of GHG per kilometer in a plug-in 40. That's because the battery is a lot bigger. Now, battery replacements would essentially multiply these impacts each time you replace a battery. Although I was in a cab yesterday in Vancouver, a hybrid cab, and he said that they've been driving that Camry. It was a Prius hybrid cab, and they changed the Prius battery once at 600,000 kilometers. So I think battery replacements need to be on our radar. Again, these issues, small but non-zero. So just to for my own benefit here, to stop some of the emails that are coming into me, a while ago, some outfit did a study that was picked up by a student newspaper in Connecticut, and then kind of widely reported all over the media that a Hummer had more embodied energy than a Prius. So I'm going to say professionally that the claim not supported in the peer-reviewed literature, and that in using our estimates, the Prius battery would have to weigh around 10,000 kilograms for the energy intensity of the battery to displace the kind of vehicle fuel efficiency you would get. So just so we can put it to bed here, it's debunked all over the internet, but we can put it to bed here today so I can free up my inbox for more important spam. Okay. So what are the drivers of GHGs from plug-in hybrids? And again, as Bradley mentioned, there's not a single right answer in this area, and it's and it's a space that all of us need to be familiar with and be able to turn the dials in wherever we are and what our assumptions are and figure out the answers that are appropriate. Now, of course, greenhouse gas intensity of electricity changes depending on what fuels you're using to generate electricity. The liquid fuels issue is also a big driver. So as the U.S. uses more oil sands, as Canada uses more oil sands, could we use coal to liquids depending on which biofuels we use? These will all change the footprint of our existing gasoline, both combustion and upstream emissions. And then how far are we traveling on electricity versus fuels? How big of the battery do we have? What's the efficiency of the vehicle? We always talk about kilometers per liter or miles per gallon. We also need to start thinking about kilowatt hours per kilometer and miles per kilowatt hour. What are our travel patterns? Where are we charging? We did an estimate in one study that said, I guess kind of obvious though, that you want to be driving on electricity most of the time. So you want to try to find a battery that fits most of your commuting patterns. Right? If you travel 20 or 30 km per day, you want to try to find a battery that will give you 20 or 30 km of capacity. Now, as you go farther than that capacity, there's a little bit of a range, and then a switchover point happens where you would want to buy a bigger battery. But you have to be careful because as you buy a bigger battery, you have a little bit more weight in the vehicle that starts to degrade some of your both electrical and vehicle fuel economy. So it's not an art, and there's no way all of us are going to be able to predict how far we're going to travel each day, but we should have a good idea and make this calculation. Okay, so here's a result on life cycle greenhouse gas emissions with plug-in hybrids versus conventional vehicles and conventional hybrid vehicles. So on the bottom, we see the life cycle greenhouse gas intensity of electricity. So as we move from left to right, you have the low carbon options, renewables, nuclear, fossil with CCS, or fossil with carbon capture and sequestration. As we move through natural gas, and then finally on the right, all the way on the right is our coal options. And then on the y-axis, on the left-hand side of the graph, is the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions per vehicle per kilometer. Right, so as we would expect, down towards the low carbon end of the spectrum, down here on the left-hand side of the graph, the plug-in with 30 kilometers of electric range and a plug-in with 60 kilometers of electric range far have big reductions in greenhouse gases versus conventional hybrids and conventional vehicles. As we move towards the natural gas and up into the coal region, we see that the plug-in vehicles still beat the conventional vehicles, even when charged on coal. However, it starts to become within the range of uncertainty on whether or not they have lower life cycle greenhouse gas emissions per kilometer than traditional hybrids. So, you know, obviously the grid will get cleaner as we move forward, and it's possible that liquid fuels could get dirtier as we use unconventional and non-conventional fuels. But we have to think about optimizing and getting our decisions when we roll out plug-in hybrid vehicles towards that left-hand side of the graph. So just for...
Sorry to interrupt, but maybe just define the PHEV 16 to 30.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I didn't do it either.
No problem. So a PHEV 30 is looks like a conventional vehicle. It has a battery. It looks like a conventional hybrid. It has a battery in the trunk that would be able to allow it to drive on electricity for the first 30 kilometers of range, after which it would basically operate like a regular hybrid. And a plug-in 60 would be the same vehicle except a bigger battery, and you would have 60 kilometers of all-electric range. Appropriate? Okay. So here is the Canadian average electricity and the US average electricity. So we can see that in most provinces of Canada, we're doing very well if we're charging on that electricity that looks like that. As we move towards the middle and we get towards the US average, and maybe towards an Alberta or another area where we have higher GHG intensive electricity, we have to think about where we are and redo the calculation to make sure that we're getting the life cycle GHGs that we want. So I won't leave this up for long, but this is just an illustrative option. What are our options for liquid fuels? You'll see here the second group of bars is electrified transportation, and there's wide uncertainty bars on all of these. I have petroleum, biofuels, coal to liquids, and hydrogen. And depending on the assumptions and the efficiencies that we are assuming, they will all have different answers. But it looks like, electrified transportation, even within the range of uncertainty, has a set of robust options that will be able to allow us to reduce GHGs from transportation very effectively. So another comment is to make sure as we go through and look at life cycle assessments that we're using thorough peer-reviewed analyses to make these comparisons. I think as in the US, we're starting to roll out low carbon fuel standards that have life cycle assessment built into them. All over the world, as we deal with climate and carbon, we're going to have to think about life cycle assessment and life cycle implications. But it's important that we're using sources that are both that are open and peer-reviewed, because otherwise we don't know what we're buying. We at RAND have just completed a life cycle model of biomass production for bioenergy for the US DOE. It's free, it's open source, it's fully cited, it's fully documented, and that's how things should be. Because otherwise, we don't know what's behind the black box that you're telling me that you have X GHGs per mile or X GHGs per kilowatt hour. So what are some strategies that can manage upstream emissions? And I'll finish up here shortly. For plug-in hybrids, we could try to match new electric loads with low carbon generation, either with renewable energy credits or by adjusting renewable portfolio standards. We could increase workplace charging infrastructure. Most of this charging is probably going to happen at home. However, if you knew that you had dedicated charging in and around a downtown core or in and around your workplace, you might be able to purchase a smaller vehicle battery up front and be able to manage on electricity both ways. Of course, we're going to have to improve manufacturing processes and resource needs to try to lower that initial manufacturing footprint. But then as we think mid to long term, we have to decarbonize the grid. It's an imperative. If we want large life cycle GHGs reductions from these vehicles, we have to decarbonize the grid. And maybe we can have some intelligent charging and dispatching that dispatches on a carbon signal. And we also have to think about how we can price that and what types of policies we might need to do. So finally, if we think of nothing else, we've learned that life cycle assessment encompasses the materials, the manufacturing, the use, and the end of life. And we have to think about these issues as we calculate emissions. Plug-in vehicles can have large life cycle GHG reductions compared to conventional vehicles and conventional hybrids when charged with low carbon electricity. And of course, we have to compare all of our options on a life cycle basis and really understand what types of issues and drivers can change the answer. So I look forward to interacting with everyone as the panel concludes. Thank you.